with this mask and this shirt, I declare this season to be Halloween! That's right, ladies and gentlemen, another Halloween is upon us. My name is Austin, and yes, I actually have a mask for this season, and a new shirt, as opposed to last year, which I just wore a Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees t-shirt. But, regardless, I want to talk about something. One is the movies that I covered back around 2020, or 2021 when I actually uploaded those videos to my pal Ace Hagar's channel, and some of the movies that I covered so far on this channel, because, well, let's just say I have a very specific type of film in mind for each video.
When I did the initial Halloween reviews, those being Stand By Me in 2020, 2021 when it was actually uploaded, and Ghost in 2021, no delays there, I did those as they seemed to be related to horror, even though they weren't horror films, as I didn't really have an idea for a Halloween review. I did the Stand By Me review because while it wasn't a horror movie, it was based on a story from a horror writer, that of course being Stephen King, even though it would have made more sense to do a review of either Misery or The Dead Zone, both of which are some of my other favorite Stephen King adaptations alongside Stand By Me, or something like The Shining, The Mist, Christine, Carrie, or even Creepshow, which has stories written by King. Same with Ghost. I did that mostly because it was a ghost story, and by that I mean a story about a ghost who attempts to save his former lover, even though if I had reviewed Beetlejuice, Ghostbusters, Ghost Story, The Exorcist, The Sixth Sense, The Others, The Conjuring, Poltergeist, or even House, the 1977 Japanese horror film, although the 1986 horror comedy is also an option, it would have made more sense, and probably would have made no difference if I had done any of those. But in the end, I chose to do a film by a horror writer for Halloween 2020, and a film that made Unchained Melody popular again for Halloween 2021. Moving to the subject matter of the show, you'll notice that minus the occasional video where I talk about video game ideas or tell absurd stories, I tend to review movies on the channel, with the occasional TV show here and there, and most of the films tend to be old films, with the oldest being Rear Window from 1954, and the most recent being Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, which has released in 2005, and even then, most of the films I review tend to be from the last 20, 30, 40 some odd years. Trust me, if I review a movie, it's either going to be from when disco was in, when this was considered a mobile phone, when people were arguing whether the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis were the superior consoles, or when people either had a PlayStation 2, GameCube, or an original Xbox, with most of the stuff sometimes being from a time that I remember. Either back when I was watching Jetix, or when I was watching The Hub, either of those time frames. This is because I generally feel geared toward talking about old films, either because I have nostalgia for a certain film, or I have simply never experienced it before. It's sometimes fascinating to go back in time to when these films were big back in the day, and to hopefully get you all to experience these films, maybe even for the first time. Now this doesn't mean that I hate modern movies, far from it. There are plenty of great movies that come out within the last couple of years. There are even some movies that came out this year that I want to go see. It's just that I tend to flock towards older films, not due to their lasting impact on not just cinema itself, but also on our everyday lives. Whether we're quoting them at a party, comparing them to certain situations and real-life occurrences, or just acting out a scene, older films are the blueprint of what fuels our imaginations and builds the foundation for our everyday lives. At the same time, however, I still like to watch new films because there are still plenty of great films being made every day. Whether it's mindless mayhem for our entertainment, or something that can make you think and really amaze you. I've had thoughts about covering more modern movies, or at least those released within the last decade, but due to certain circumstances and a general feeling toward older movies, these have not happened yet. In fact, the only films that were somewhat recent that I've reviewed were from the 2000s. Those being Gladiator and American Psycho, both from 2000, Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones from 2002, Elf from 2003, and Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith from 2005. And that's not even counting the TV shows, as The World of Norway aired its one season in 2003, and Ben 10 aired from 2005 to 2008. As for things from the 2010s, I have yet to cover such a thing. That is, until now.
And so, with this being the season of scaring the living crap out of each other, entering sugar comas, and watching a lot of horror films, I decided not only to cover a legit horror film that isn't just simply a film with horror elements like Dressed to Kill or Ghost, which simply has scenes that horrify the living crap out of people, but also a film that is somewhat recent, at least according to 2017, which was 5 years ago. That film in question is Get Out, from director Jordan Peele, starring David Kaluuya, Allison Williams, Bradley Whitford, and Catherine Keener. So, without further ado, let's talk about it.
The plot centers on Chris, a black photographer who goes alongside his white girlfriend Rose to go see her parents, who live in upstate New York, also known as the beautiful side of New York that's not crowded with hobos in the subway. When he meets her parents, he begins to know strange things about them, from the housekeeper Georgina and groundskeeper Walter, both of whom are black, to Rose's mother Missy's usage of hypnotherapy, which puts Chris into what is called the sunken place, and from there, all sorts of weird things begin to happen, with Chris becoming suspicious, something which his friend Rod mirrors. Excuse me. And what follows are a series of spine-tingling moments of fright combined with intelligent commentary on racism in our society, especially these days. If this plot sounds vague, that's because I'm trying my hardest not to spoil too much. But trust me, when you see it, it'll make sense. But rest assured, it's a gripping plot that makes you want to see just what's going to happen, with some elements of the Stepford Wives placed in there for a good mix. Now then, it's production time, so let's get to it. The production for Get Out began when Jordan Peele, who at the time had worked in comedy, including a stint on Mad TV and creating the sketch show Key and Peele, was introduced to producer Sean McKitterick, whose pedigree includes Donnie Darko, World's Greatest Dad, BlacKkKlansman, and Us, by his partner Keegan-Michael Key in 2013. McKitterick remembers, "I was shooting a movie with Keegan-Michael Key. He said, 'You gotta meet Jordan. He's a horror fanatic and he has all these ideas.' Jordan and I met in New Orleans. He said, 'Here's one you'll never want to make,' and he pitched me the whole story. I'd never seen that movie before. It fascinated me. So I said right at the table, 'Okay, I'm going to buy this pitch and pay you to write it.' I think he was a little shocked. Within the first 2 months, Peele began writing the first draft of the script, with the Stepford Wives providing inspiration for the director due to its elements of satire between its thrills and chills, with the themes of racism being noted by the director as being very personal, although he also claimed that it's definitely not anything too autobiographical. When writing the script, Peele noticed that comedy and horror are almost similar in structure due to how it hinges on the reveals, even deeming comedy as his training for making a horror film. And that's all I've got here, so let's move on. For the film's casting, Daniel Kaluuya was cast as Chris in November of 2015, who was cast due to his performance in the Black Mirror episode 15 Million Merits, and accepted the role in the film due to the party scene, and described Chris as the everyman that everyone and their mother knew back in the day. That nice guy you remember because they were in your class. When Allison Williams was cast as Rose in November of 2015, around the same time that Daniel Kaluuya was cast as Chris, this was based on Jordan Peele's belief that she could trick the audience into a false sense of hope, for which he noted, "Jordan told me that he had always pictured me as Rose because Peter Pan and Marnie would make it easier for people to trust me. I was looking for a role that would weaponize everything that people take for granted about me, so I instantly signed on for it." Williams later found that certain white members of the audience believed that Rose was brainwashed by the cult, a sentiment that she does not share, stating that Rose is just pure evil and that no one's pulling her strings. This is proven with how the character drinks milk in one scene, as this was added in shortly before shooting to make the character of Rose extra creepy. With the song "I've Had This Time of My Life" by Bill Medley and Jennifer Warnes from my mom's favorite movie Dirty Dancing, serving as symbolism of Rose's emotional detachment. On the subject of milk, Peele explained, "There's something kind of horrific about milk. Think about it. Think about what we're doing. Milk is kind of gross." This was based on an experience he had in high school when one classmate made him drink what he thought was milk, only to find out it was horse semen. Okay, I made that one up, but that wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. Anyway, additional casting was carried out between December of 2015 and February of 2016. Tiffany Haddish was offered a role in an audition for a role in the flick, but said no, and blah blah blah. Let's move on to the next segment. The film began shooting its principal photography footage on February 16, 2016, which took place in Fairhope, Alabama for about 3 weeks, including the interior and exterior of the house, which was filmed just south of Fairhope, with other scenes being filmed near Barton Academy and in the Ashland Place Historic District in Midtown Mobile, Alabama, which lasted for 23 days. Although the movie was filmed in Alabama, Jordan Peele made it quite clear that this movie does not take place in the South, let alone the Yellowhammer State, even stating in an interview with the Washington Post that he pretty much avoided having the film take place in any red states, the places where you're bound to find some racists, as he didn't want it to be the stereotypical redneck, but rather those with liberal ideals that make you believe they're on your side who are hiding dark secrets. And as I just mentioned during the opening of the review, the movie is set in upstate New York, which is also what Jeff Herbert said in an interview for the Syracuse, New York Post-Standard in February of 2017. When Vanity Fair interviewed Peele for their list of the 25 most influential movie scenes of the past 25 years, he described The Sunken Place as a sort of personal journey, explaining, "I always had this concept of the place that you're falling toward when you're going to sleep, and you get that falling sensation and catch yourself. And if you didn't catch yourself, where would you end up? I had this hellish image, and I thought of this idea of, what if you were in a place and you could look through your own eyes as if they were literal windows or a screen and see what your body was seeing, but feel like a prisoner in your own mind, the chamber of your mind." The moment I thought of that, it immediately occurred to me the theme of abduction and connection to the prison industrial complex that this movie was sort of presenting as a metaphor for. It was a very emotional discovery. I remember having so much fun writing it, but at that moment when I figured out this weird esoteric, but also an emotionally brutal form of suffering to put the character through, I literally cried writing the scene. When discussing the film's allegorical symbolism, Rod actor Lil Rel Howery claimed that it's pretty much entrenched in the fear that African Americans have faced throughout history. He put it like this: "It just goes back to the way I grew up. I'm just being honest. Segregation created this. Stories about people like Emmett Till. It's history. Crazy things have happened, so people are going to embellish and pass that on to their kids as a warning." Jordan was so smart to hit on all these stories that could be considered myths, but a lot of it is rooted in truth. When discussing the film's chances of success, a worried Peele told the Los Angeles Times, "What if white people don't come to see the movie because they're afraid of being villainized with black people in the crowd? What if black people don't want to see the movie because they don't want to sit next to a white person while a black person is being victimized on screen?" Given how the movie grossed a total of $255.4 million on a budget of $4.5 million, I think we can all say the film was anything but a stinker. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So with that, let's head to our next part of the review. When it comes to the film's ending, the one we see is honestly pretty satisfying. Upon seeing what appears to be a police car in front of him after strangling Rose, Chris stands in fear that the police will arrest him for trying to kill her. Instead, he finds Rod there in the car, who rescues Chris and leaves Rose to bleed out, ending the film on a high note. This wasn't always the case, however, as the original ending was a lot more depressing. In the original ending, Chris does get arrested for strangling Rose, Rod meets him in jail, and when he asks for information about the Armitage family, Chris just says that he stopped them and that all is well. Jordan Peele did this ending because he wanted to showcase the sad realities about racism, but by the time production started, several high-profile acts of violence against African Americans by police officers were making headlines. Realizing that using such an ending would be a bad idea, Peele opted to change the ending in favor of something lighter and less anticlimactic, but did keep a moment where the audience thinks Chris is going to jail to keep them on their toes. There were some other endings that were considered, some of which can be found on DVD and Blu-ray, including one where Rod breaks into the estate and finds Chris, but when he calls his name, Chris responds with, "I assure you, I don't know who you're talking about." But let's be honest here, the ending we do have is satisfying, and it's exactly what we want to see. For the music, Michael Abels, who would go on to do Peele's other films, including Us and Nope, helped compose the score for Get Out, which Peele wanted to have musical references and voices that were distinctly from a black voice, which was harder than Tetris with a blindfold, as Peele found that African American music was found to be slightly hopeful in his eyes. Still though, he didn't just want to have a voodoo aesthetic. So when the final score was done, Swahili voices and a blues influence were utilized. The Swahili lyrics, "Sikiliza kwa Wahenga," used for the score translates to "listen to your ancestors," which, as you can tell, is supposed to signal that something bad is about to happen and it's time to start running. Peele basically said that it's a warning sign to Chris, stating, "The whole idea of the movie is get out. It's what we're screaming at the character on screen." Aside from the usage of "I've Had the Time of My Life" during the scene with Rose, other songs include "Run Rabbit Run" by Flanagan and Allen, and "Redbone" by Childish Gambino, Donald Glover's rapper persona. And with everything on the production discussed here, let's move to my overall thoughts and wrap this review up before Michael Myers starts stalking teenagers to throw toilet paper at their homes instead of just killing them. Get Out is fan-goddamn-tastic, which isn't surprising to most of you, but it is. Trust me. This movie is more than just one of my favorite horror movies of the last couple of years, but also my favorite film of the last decade. In a decade where the early part was the one I remember the most. For starters, its themes of racism are very compelling. Well, and of course, is something that we definitely see a lot of these days. But it doesn't portray its villains as the typical racists, whether we're talking about those dressing in bed sheets, the skinheads, or any other type of hateful individuals harboring prejudices for those who aren't white. Rather, they're portrayed as left-leaning middle-class white folk, those that say stuff like, "I would have voted for Obama a third time," and those you'd probably find shopping at Trader Joe's. Not that I shop there though, and not that all the people there are probably disgusting human beings. The people that say this sort of stuff to make African Americans feel all warm and fuzzy inside, but in reality, they're playing them like a fiddle, and they don't give a damn about them just as long as they have them eating out of their hand. It's very intelligent and shows that there are plenty of liberals with prejudices against blacks as well, and it's refreshing to see this than if Jordan Peele were to have the villains be a bunch of stereotypical rednecks. It also helps that the social commentary doesn't take a back seat to the scares and thrills, meaning it never feels forced or phoned in than in something like the 2019 remake of Black Christmas, which feels contrived and heavy-handed, as it's just there because it's popular to do. Get Out isn't like that though, as the film and director Jordan Peele are smarter than that, and know that the purpose of the film is to be a horror film, not a soapbox. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, messages. Is the film scary? Well, I certainly think so. From the scene of Rose's brother Jeremy trying to put Chris in a headlock, the groundskeeper Walter running around at night surprising Chris, and the moment where the film's title gets dropped like the microphone at a comedy club.
Get out. Sorry, man. Okay. Get out!
There are some pretty intense scenes that will leave you on edge. Then there are these scenes in the sunken place. And that's pretty scary when you think about it. Just being in a place shrouded in darkness, being unable to move as you sink to the ground, that's something that, no matter what race, gender, religion, whatever you are, is pretty terrifying. Especially when you factor in that it's a form of hypnosis that the villains use to lure unsuspecting African Americans into becoming vessels for their family and friends. Needless to say, I would not want to be in the sunken place and allow my body to be a vessel for anyone. Not even my dad. The movie also never relies on jump scares. Instead, letting the scares play out on their own without a sudden "YAH!" coming out just for a cheap scare, which is nice. But moving on from the reasons the film is scary are the performances, with Daniel Kaluuya being excellent as Chris, making him relatable, likable, and charming, meaning when the crap starts to hit the fan, you are rooting for him to succeed. And really, that's what we want in a horror movie character. Someone who's likable and we want to see get out of there alive. It also helps that he's very resourceful, using the flash in his camera to outwit one of the villains, and even using the stuffing in the chair to block out any noise, therefore then faking a state of unconsciousness to escape his captors. Allison Williams also does a great job as Rose, Chris's girlfriend, who leads us to believe that she will help Chris and making us believe that she's on our side, only for her to pull the rug from under us and revealing that she's in on the scheme. Williams masterfully pulls off the master manipulator role excellently, and subverting the typical white savior trope without missing a beat. Excuse me. Then there's the performances of Bradley Whitford and Catherine Keener as Rose's parents, Dean and Missy Armitage, who who on the surface seem normal, but as the film goes on, you realize that these two are hiding something in their closet, and it's not good. Whitford plays Dean excellently, capturing the villainous qualities of the character superbly, as he has also done before with his roles in as Eric in Billy Madison and Steve Hadley in The Cabin in the Woods, although those were played for laughs, whereas this is played for the screams. While Catherine Keener is very good as Missy, helping to make you really fear the idea of hypnotism and the idea of the sunken place. Not to mention is something very different for the actress, as my experience with her has been mostly in films like The 4-Year-Old Virgin and Into the Wild. Other great performances include Laurel Howery as Rod, Chris's best friend with the TSA who functions as comic relief, Caleb Landry Jones as Rose's brother Jeremy, who even if it weren't for what he and his family do would still be considered unstable, Stephen Root as Jim Hudson, the least racist yet still pretty bad art dealer who merely wants Chris's body just so he can see, Lakeith Stanfield as Andre Hayworth, aka Logan King, the man who's being controlled by one of the people that the Armitage is operated on, who also does the title drop, Betty Gabriel as Georgina, the housekeeper who turns out to be Rose's grandma, and even then, if I saw that face, would have this response. And Marcus Henderson as Walter, the groundskeeper who's actually Rose's grandpa. Plus, keep on the lookout for Keegan-Michael Key as an NCAA prospect, Erica Alexander as the detective that Rod goes to for help, and the late Richard Hurd of B fame as Rose's grandfather Roman prior to his operation. The movie also has great cinematography, with plenty of dynamic shots and uses of wide-angle lenses, ensuring that you not only get a movie with plenty of scares, but also a good-looking movie with plenty of scares. The movie is also tightly edited and has very good pacing, clocking in a solid hour and 44 minutes, ensuring that the film doesn't overstay its welcome. And to bring it all full circle, the music is fantastic, with its Swahili lyrics and blues-style motif enhancing the chilling mood of the film, and feeling something reminiscent of the score for The Shining, which, given how the film opens, really makes sense. It's a fantastic score, and one that shows that Michael Abels could become another one of the greats in terms of composing film scores for movies. Overall, Get Out is an amazing film, and as I just said, is probably the best film of the 2010s. I don't think I have to explain this for you, but here it is. Get Out was a success. Like I mentioned, the film grossed $255.4 million on a budget of $4.5 million, and became the 10th most profitable film upon its release on February 24th, 2017. The movie also gained rave reviews from critics, with Richard Roeper awarding the film 3.5 out of 4 stars, Mike Rogo of IGN giving it a 9 out of 10, Peter Travers of Rolling Stone awarded it a 3.5 out of 4 stars, and Scott Mendelson of Forbes called it a modern American horror classic. The movie also went on to garner 4 Oscar nominations at the 90th Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Actor for Daniel Kaluuya, with Jordan Peele winning for Best Original Screenplay. With this, Peele became the 3rd person to gain nominations for Best Picture, Best Director, and Screenplay, following Warren Beatty and James L. Brooks, and the first African American to win Best Original Screenplay, along with being the 4th overall to be nominated, following Suzanne DePass, Spike Lee, and John Singleton. In 2018, IndieWire writers put the script as the 3rd best American screenplay of the 21st century, with Chris O'Pelt stating, "Hitchcock-like in its execution, and playing off genre and audience expectation, especially about how racial dynamics are traditionally portrayed on screen, The twists and turns of Get Out are not only gasp-inducing, each one reveals a new layer to its exploration of systemic racist belief systems. And in 2021, the Writers Guild of America ranked the screenplay as the greatest of the 21st century so far. So, yeah, the film was a huge hit, even if Armand White says it blows because he's a troll, and we tend to ignore trolls because it's just not worth it. Get Out probably will be poised to become another one of the horror classics alongside such classics as The Exorcist, Frankenstein, The Silence of the Lambs, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and An American Werewolf in London, and will most likely be remembered for years to come, especially with its themes of race relations. It's certainly quite the film, and with Peele directing Us and Nope, as well as producing BlacKkKlansman and Candyman 2021, he's certainly come a long way from appearing on Mad TV, and I look forward to what comes next.
So that's Get Out. It's a great film, and I recommend it. Whether you decide to pick it up on DVD or Blu-ray, I have the Blu-ray DVD combo pack here, it is a film that is definitely worth your time, and you should definitely see it at least once. It's well acted, well shot, has a great musical score, and has a great screenplay with intriguing social critiques of racism in our society. It's a film that, in my opinion, is important watching for really any horror fan or someone who just wants something interesting with a little social commentary here and there. It's definitely a film that you definitely should seek out. And with that, this closes out my review of Get Out. I hope you enjoyed it, found it entertaining, educational, and it makes you want to go seek out this movie. And you definitely should seek it out at least once. So with that, I want to wish you all a very happy, candy, horror movie-filled Halloween as we enter into November, where we all get that turkey stuffed in our stomachs. So with that, I will catch you later. I'll see you next time.